Hello, I'm Jason, and welcome back to Community Design Review, where we look at some of the most popular custom cards from the custommagic subreddit. Starting with the silver border card of the week, Bear Witness. Bear Witness is a 2/2 for green-blue. It's a creature bear, of course. If an opponent would look at cards in a zone other than their hand, you may also look at those cards. Tap. You and target opponent scry 1. Okay, this is pretty cool. So whenever your opponent scries, looks at the top cards of their library, I guess face down exiled cards, anything like that, you get to see it too, which is only minorly helpful, but it's certainly a little bit of an advantage. And then also has the ability to make you and your opponent scry 1 and you know what they're scrying. The main thing about this is it's not really green for any reason other than the fact that it's a bear, and I guess that it's a 2/2 for 2. Blue doesn't really get 2/2s for 2 without downsides, and even then not really. I guess back in Khans of Tarkir there were a couple blue-green cards that had to do with morphing or looking at morphed cards. So going along that thought pattern, I think that it's probably fine in green-blue. Next, we have one of our shoutouts for the week, Clockwork Cosmos. 3 and a red for an enchantment. Non-basic lands don't untap during untap steps, and each non-basic land has untap. This land deals 2 damage to you. Activate this ability only once each turn. This is kind of a cool mana barbs / winter orb card that makes it difficult for you to use non-basic lands, but it stays very well in flavor for red, being that it doesn't really stop you from untapping them as much as it requires you to deal damage to yourself to untap. And keep in mind, you can actually use this ability on your turn and your opponent's turn, so this can actually give you more mana if you're willing to take the damage or you have something like a Platinum Empyrean on it. Definitely a cool card and totally in flavor, and I think the costing is probably right at 4 mana for that. And it's a symmetrical effect, which, as we all know, symmetrical effects are entirely fair. Next, we have another shoutout, Muck Walker. It's a land creature, swamp zombie, 1/1. We all love Dryad Arbor. Tap, add black, because it's a swamp, and whenever it becomes tapped, you lose 1 life. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may sacrifice a swamp. If you do, return Muck Walker from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Okay, so this is kind of a cool difference from Dryad Arbor, because you actually have a downside of losing life when it becomes tapped, so it's making it so it's not like strictly better than Dryad Arbor. Now, of course, it's color shifted as well, but you can get it back continuously by sacrificing a different swamp. So since it's just a 1/1, this isn't necessarily the best in like aggro decks and things like that, but it seems like it could be really good in an aristocrat style deck because it's a creature that's also a land, so you can sacrifice it, but you also have the ability to bring it back every single turn. I would say with that in mind, using it in an aristocrat style deck, it might actually be too powerful. Every single turn you get a new creature. You do have to sacrifice a swamp to do it, but I mean, even if you have like a Blood Artist out, that can be a lot of life lost really quickly. But definitely a cool design. Moving on, next we have the Time Eater for 4 blue. It's a 6/6 legendary creature slug wizard with trample, and whenever an opponent casts a spell, put a clock counter on the Time Eater. Then if it's not your turn and there are 6 or more clock counters on the Time Eater, remove all clock counters from the Time Eater and end the turn. So this is pretty interesting. 6/6 trample for 6 is fine. We all love Colossal Dreadmaw. And whenever an opponent casts a spell, you get a clock counter. 6 clock counters means you end the turn, and that's not optional. I think this makes the most sense in probably Commander, because 1, you can get the most use out of it, and 2, it'll actually cause a lot of tension between your opponents. Once you get to 4 or 5 counters, it's, well, who's going to cast the next spell? Since this ability goes on the stack in response to that spell resolving, that person's actually going to lose that spell. So it actually counters every 6th spell in addition to ending the turn. My first thought was this would go well in a control style deck as your finisher, but I realized that by the time you get this out when you're playing most control decks, your opponent isn't going to have enough spells to really trigger this again. Having only 1 opponent does make it more interesting because then they have to run that 6th spell into it or just never cast spells again. But actually having multiple opponents can delay a lot of spells from your opponents because none of them want to be the one to set it off. So I really like this one, and I would love to try it out in a Commander deck. Next, we have Oru the Beyonder for 4 blue-red, a 6/6 legendary creature Elder Leviathan with Commander Suspend, 4 for blue and a red. That's normal suspend, but you can also do it from your command zone. This is really cool because Wizards has actually done quite a few Commander-style keyword abilities where you can use the thing from your command zone in addition to your hand, for example, Commander Ninjutsu. So it seems totally reasonable that they could do a Commander Suspend of some sort. It also has whenever you cast another spell from exile, if Oru is on the battlefield or suspended, create a 1/1 blue tentacle creature creature token. Wow, this is really cool. There are so many things you can do with this. First of all, it's a really cheap way of casting your commander, but it takes several turns. If you just suspend it on turn 2, probably every game, that totally works. Then once it's died once, you might not want to be waiting 4 turns to cast it again, but it's really cool to have the option, and you get a bonus even while it's suspended. So when you're casting other spells from exile, that's a really cool ability that I don't know if has been done before, where you get a bonus from casting spells from exile. At least I can't think of any off the top of my head, but it's really cool because it works perfectly with more suspend, so you can kind of build a suspend deck. Joyra of the Gitu would be a great addition to this deck, or could be the commander, and Oru would make a great addition to the deck. Either way, they work really well together. You can do suspend things, you can do rebound, and then it also creates tokens. So you're in blue-red, which you could probably make a token deck out of this as well, looking at cards that would probably go in like a Locust God type deck, so I think that would work perfectly. Next up, we have Innocent Child for 2 and a black. It's a 2/1 creature human. When Innocent Child enters the battlefield, destroy target dog, cat, fish, bird, or insect. This is pretty interesting. It seems to me like a kid who accidentally kills his pet by doing something totally innocent. However, the artwork chosen for this picture kind of tells an exact opposite story, where it's probably intentionally killing the pet or someone else's pet, or just random things that he finds. So kind of funny. Probably not the best card ever, but hey, they're making dogs and cats so popular right now that this might be a good sideboard card. Next up, we have Jumpy Adventurer for 2 red white. We have a 3/5 creature dwarf rogue. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield, Jumpy Adventurer fights it. I think that's really cool. This is and it says in the flavor text right there, mimics man, never again. The idea being in a dungeon, lots of Dungeons and Dragons or different RPG games like that, lots of artifacts will come to life and try to attack you in some way. And so this is kind of cool because if it's an artifact creature, you fight it, and if it's not, nothing happens. I think you could probably afford to put some reminder text in there, like you cannot fight a non-creature permanent or something along those lines, but definitely a cool card and great flavor there, I think. And finally, we have Fetch Land. Land for 0 mana, because it's a land. Tap, add colorless. Tap an untapped dog you control, add 1 mana of any color. 3, tap, create a tapped 1/1 white dog creature token. Okay, so this is a pun, Fetch Land. The last ability is probably a little bit too powerful. If you look at Vitu-Ghazi, the city tree, it's 4 mana to make a 1/1, plus it's 2 colored mana, and you don't have the ability to actually tap that to make a colored mana. That said, that card was made over 10 years ago, so it's very possible that Fetch Land wouldn't be broken now. We certainly have a lot more broken cards than a land that produces 1/1s every turn. Probably a fine card overall. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll be back next week with another community design review.